Philip and Shoshana Reiner, along with their 3 children, are the co-founders, ranchers, cultivators, and farmhands of Ma'alot Farms, which is a permaculture-based homestead right here in Los Gatos, where they tend their flocks of poultry and herd of kinder goats. Ma'alot Farms envisions a Jewish community enriched by engaged and motivated educators committed to ecological sustainability, regenerative agriculture, food justice, and earth-based Judaism. You can follow their homesteading journeys at Ma'alot Farms. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Linda, and to the whole Shir Hadash Sustainability Committee for inviting us to spend some time with you this afternoon on this beautiful, drizzly day. For those of you that joined us a little earlier, we were just speaking about how wonderful it is to finally have some rain this season, so necessary for our ecosystems here. And as so many of us know, we just came out of, well, I don't know if we actually came out of it, debate whether we actually came out of a drought at all, or whether we just got a taste of coming out of a drought. So the weather is welcome. And one of the silver linings of this time in all of our lives of being physically apart, but being socially together, is the opportunity to do a farm tour on Zoom. I don't think we never imagined when we started Ma'alot Farms that we would be doing Zoom tours and talking about things like the importance of trees in our ecosystems, the role that they play in sustaining critters of all sizes, including us human beings, and the beautiful interface that we can have with trees, the kavanah, the intention we might try to foster during this season as we're watching everything turn green again, maybe seeing some blossoms just starting to come out in some of our very early trees. We all know, if you live in California, I know we got folks who are joining us from all over the country, that in Israel and also here in California, we begin to see those blossoms of spring starting to pop out right around this time of year every year, and a great time to celebrate trees for the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. So before we dive into Tu B'Shvat and talk about what this 15th day of the month of Shvat's all about and how it came to be and why it's still so critical for us to highlight trees in our lives and have an intention of care and concern, we wanted to share a little bit about Ma'alot Farms with you. Now, I just have to preface all this by saying, Shoshana, it's not going to be the same as coming for the real deal. Some of the beautiful eau de farm, the smells that fill your nostrils as you walk around, of stepping in squishy mud or feeling different textures. We're going to miss out on all of that. So for those of you who like going to visit a clean farm, I'll tell you they don't exist, but today on Zoom, it exists. So I'm going to start our screen share here, and we're going to do a little bit of a slideshow of some of the things that we do and experience here at our homestead at Ma'alot Farms. Then we're going to talk a little bit about trees and a special forest that we have here at Ma'alot Farms, and then have some time for questions and share a little bit about what we can all do to celebrate Tu B'Shvat this year. So without further ado, I am going to use my savvy computer skills, and see if we can get our screen sharing open here.
Great. Leave full screen. So
hold, please. All right, everyone, give me a thumbs up if you can see our screen. It should say Ma'alot. All right, we got everyone thumbs up. Fantastic, fantastic. Well, this is a shot from near the middle of our property. This is a picture from late spring, right around Shavuot, actually, right around the barley harvest in the land of Israel. And also here, it happens to be in Northern California. We actually are able to cut this barley that's mixed in with clover.
I got something from your health insurance, and it shows that
Okay, take
We
that
want
off.
to invite everyone, check and make sure you're on mute.
for
Okay, I think Paul, whoever is Paul should not be here, and we're trying to delete them.
All right.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. All right. Great. So yeah, so this is a shot here from Mallet Farms. About 2 years ago, sorry. There we go. About 2 years ago, Shoshana and I and our 3 children flipped our suburban home in Saratoga into a little piece of land here in Los Gatos, 16 acres. It was previously a walnut orchard that had been planted more than 100 years ago, and it passed from family down to their son, and then the land was just a home for a Los Gatos resident for a number of years until they were ready to move back into the suburbs, and we had an opportunity to start our homestead. We feel really blessed to be able to be cultivating land that belonged to the Ohlone people, and the cultivation that they did in our ecosystem for so many years has laid the groundwork for us to be able to cultivate here and to benefit from their work and work towards justice in recognizing the rights of first citizens here in our land, the people who were here before us. And also we express gratitude to the folks that ran the walnut orchard here for so many years. We still have a couple of walnut trees. They're all pretty old. Most of them aren't fruiting, but we've tried to keep a couple of them that are still alive just to remind us of the history of our land. Here at Mallet Farms, our goal really is for us as homesteaders to provide as much as we can for ourselves and our family here within our own ecosystem. And so that is certainly aspirational, right? We're working towards that in a lot of ways. There are many days where we look around and see all of the food that we're eating, the things that we're feeding our herds and our flocks, the substances that we're using to be clean and to clean our plates, clean our bodies, clean our home, that all of those products do in fact come from Mallet Farms. There are other days where it's less so, and we're always on a journey of trying to produce what we can and to limit that which we need to consume. So here you're looking at our tiny house. The 5 of us are living in a tiny home. We have a flock of about 100 birds. Here are a bunch of our chickens. We have meat birds, and we also have layer birds that lay eggs for us. They free range the property using their poop to provide nitrogen for our soils. They get to go wherever they want. In fact, on a regular basis, even though we're Jewish, we get to go on an egg hunt. It's not an Easter egg hunt. It's just a regular everyday egg hunt to see what new places our hens have found to lay. And in fact, the eggs that our chickens as well as our quail, what they produce, that's a lot of the protein that we consume here at Mallet Farms. Oh, here in our chicken yard, that far building's our quail coop where we keep quail. The quail can't free range. They're not allowed to go where they want. Otherwise, they'd all go join the quail that are all around us. So they live very, very comfortable, sheltered lives in this beautiful coop. All of the coops, everything we make here, we upcycle wood from pallets and other materials that are safe to use for animals and for plants and repurpose that wood. So in rabbinical school, they taught us how to make that quail coop in the back there. No, I'm just kidding. We had to build that about 4 times until we got it right because we're rabbis.
compromise, but now it stands.
But it does stand. Though the quail provide eggs and meat for us, as well as the chickens. Here are two of our guardians. That's Lavi and Sella. They're our livestock guardians. They keep our flocks and our herds and our whole homestead safe from the coyote and the bobcats and mountain lion and all other smaller critters that would see our chickens as a tasty meal. One of the beautiful things about using guardian dogs is that they are non-lethal mitigation of apex predators. So our dogs don't want to kill anything. The best thing they can do and what they strive to do is help the coyote and the bobcats and the mountain lions find the turkey and the other critters to eat, not in our animal yard. And they do a great job of that. So every day it's a choice between quail eggs in the front or chicken eggs there in the back. I don't know what happened to all the pretty eggs. Did you eat all the pretty eggs, Shoshana?
They were hiding them when we took this picture.
Oh, they had hidden. They had all the pretty eggs. So in case you didn't know, chickens lay all different kinds of colored eggs. In fact, our son Ellie, until he was about 7 or 8 years old, didn't realize that chickens lay white eggs. And he was very shocked when he saw a box of eggs from the supermarket that were white. He couldn't figure that out. So we have green eggs and blue eggs and brownish eggs and pinkish eggs, all kinds. We don't have any white eggs still. We probably need to work on getting some white eggs. And those eggs in the front are two different varieties of quail that lay slightly different colored eggs. So in addition to our flocks, we also have a herd.
I don't know if you can hear them there.
Ray, give us a thumbs up if you can hear the goats. So that's Junie. This is from our last kidding season, which was last March, April. We run about 20 to 30 goats. We have both does. That's a doe right there, the bigger one, the black one. That's Junie. And some of her kids, some doelings and bucklings that are nursing right there with Lovey in the background, just making sure everyone's safe. Our herd of goats is a combination of two breeds that make a breed that's good for both meat and milk. And so we're able to milk our goats most of the year. They provide a fair amount of milk for us that we can turn into cheese. We drink the milk. That's how we make our soap. Show you some shots of that in just a moment. One of the unique things that we do here at Mile Oak Farms is that we rotationally graze our goats. So this herd of goats, you'll see behind it is some electric netting. It's got a mild current going through it that we train the goats just not to touch, and they don't touch it and stay where we put them. We graze them in really small areas around our property so that they'll have the maximum benefit to the soil that they're walking on. So their hooves help to create pockets in the soil, to aerate the soil. When they poop, that becomes fertilization for later for the next year. And by allowing them to graze everything down, it prompts the plants to expand their root system more deeply. And that expanded root system is actually what allows for our soil to take carbon out of the atmosphere and hold it in the ground. So when these plants are forming, they're actually using carbon to make like the bones of the plants, the bones of the barley, the bones of the tree, if you can think about it in that way. And the roots of those plants are putting carbon in the top couple of inches of our soil. So there are those that say that we might actually be able to take about 10% of the carbon in our atmosphere that we need to remove in order to slow down global warming, and actually through regenerative farming practices, be able to put that carbon into the soil. Probably won't do everything we need it to, but it certainly is going to be a big help. And many farmers in our country are starting to move towards regenerative grazing practices like this one, using cattle and goats and other ruminants, even buffalo, bison, to help to repair our ecosystems by creating healthy, nutrient-rich topsoil that we've been losing since the 1930s.
And this style of rotational grazing is basically looking back to how herds of wild ruminants behaved before human intervention. So, if you think about group of bison on the plains, they're in a close group. When they eat what there is to eat, they move on and they don't come back to that spot. They keep moving on. And so this is creating that same idea that instead of constantly grazing the same spot over and over, they move through and give the land time to recover and regrow before coming back through.
So a lot of our time here at Mahalo Farm is spent caring for these animals and also taking the abundance that they share with us and turning it into food or other things that we need. This is Fanny. She's our eldest mama goat. We took this video of her last season. Actually, all of our goats have dried off now. We dried them off in preparation to kid again. All of our does are now pregnant. And so they're going to be having kids in the next 2 to 3 months. So we're in a slow period right now with milking, but during most of the year, twice a day, about 2 hours a day is spent milking the goats, taking care of the milk, and then processing it. So we make cheese here at Mahalo Farms, and we make soap. Don't eat the soap. It looks beautiful. It doesn't taste as good as it usually smells. But we're able to make dish soap and body soap. We even figured out how to make dishwasher soap from goat's milk and lye. The lye doesn't come from Mahalo Farms.
And other fats.
And other fats as well. So in addition to taking care of the herd and the flock, we also grow most of our own vegetables. A shot of just some tomatoes growing in our raised beds. This was a daily harvest from last season. Some yummy radishes that our whole family loves to eat. And some squash blossoms. Here's our potato beds. We grow the potatoes in deep beds so that we can continue to add soil, and they'll put out more potatoes up the whole verticality of the potato bed, producing lots and lots of potatoes for us. And in addition to cultivating, our ecosystem provides so many blessings for us to be able to partake of. These are some mud chanterelles. So probably in a couple of weeks, now that we're getting this nice rain, we'll have a big flush of mushrooms, which we're going to talk about a little bit later this afternoon, because mushrooms, mycelium, are critically important to the trees that we share this ecosystem with. But foraging for oxalis, miner's lettuce, mushrooms, it's really a wonderful break from our daily chores at Mahalo Farms. So we're going to transition now to talking. Oh yeah, I guess maybe we can stop here if we want. If people have questions that you have for us about Mahalo Farms or about our goats or chickens or our homestead, we invite you to throw them into the chat window. You can type them in there, and Linda has graciously agreed to unmute herself and read out the questions when we get them. While you're doing that, this video right here is the part of Mahalo Farms that is a forest. This is our forest on the southernmost part of our property. We are in the process of developing it so that we can use it as silvopasture, which means thinning out the forest and allowing more light to come in so that we can plant understories in this forest that will feed our goats, provide shelter for them. We'll be able to run our chickens through this forest. And as time goes on, plant understories that might produce nuts for us, perhaps fruit trees and other things that'll produce biomass either for us or for our herd, our flocks.
Yeah. The other piece of thinning the forest in preparation for silvopasture is trying to create a forest environment that is slightly less friendly to fire. We've had, in this area, there's lots and lots of forests that are so dense, it's easy for fires to spread. So we are trying to return our forest to its more desired state, which is having space between the trees so that each tree can be its own entity with some light and other things in between them. Do we have any questions, Linda?
We do have some questions.
All right.
Kristen is wondering what breed of the dogs are.
Yeah, the dogs, they're called Kangals. They're a Turkish breed. They're similar to Anatolian Shepherds, and they are They're probably the highlight here at Ma'alot Farms for visitors and even for us. They're working dogs, they're wonderful partners, and it's a pleasure to have a canine that's not only a friend, but also a coworker. So we work together with them each and every day and night to keep everybody safe.
We have a question. What does Ma'alot mean?
That's an awesome question.
We should have started with
we
that.
should have started.
Sorry.
That's great. So Ma'alot means hills. And if you think about the book of Psalms, there are many Psalms that start with Shir HaMa'alot, right? The songs of the hills. And so we named our homestead Ma'alot because we're in the Los Gatos Hills, but also the root of the word Ma'alot, La'alot, or Allah, means to uplift or to lift something up. So we're hoping that through Ma'alot Farms, we might be able to uplift those who struggle with having enough sustenance in their lives, to uplift some of the agricultural values that we think are necessary for all of us to think about and be mindful of and adopt in order to repair our ecosystems, and to uplift all of us by having a place where, when we're able to be physically together, that we can come and celebrate the agricultural roots of Judaism and the Torah, and to find new ways of connecting with our heritage and also with each other in a new and maybe different way than we've been able to in the past. So that's what Ma'alot means.
Great. Let's see, the Johnson family is wondering about how hard it is to take care of a goat. And we also have a question about how much milk does a goat provide daily?
So it's hard to answer the question of how hard it is to care for a goat. Goats have some pretty basic needs, but most of them are hard to fulfill in a backyard. I bought a book called How to Raise Goats in an Urban Backyard, and that's when we as a family decided perhaps it was time for us to move in this direction and out of our suburban home. So they need food, they need places to graze, they need shelter, both from the weather, from the rain, but also from predators. And mostly they just need space to be able to run around and play. The question of how much milk they produce, it really depends on the breed. Our goats produce, let's see, we had 4, they produce close to half a gallon each a day when they're in full milk. But the beginning of the season, we get a little bit less because the babies are drinking more. And towards the end of the season, you get a little bit less because they're starting to dry off in preparation of the next season for kidding. So the height, you get about a half a gallon per goat for kinder goats, which is what we have. If there are other breeds of goats that are more specifically dairy goats, and they can give a gallon each or even more sometimes.
Now, Shoshana, when you make those wheels of cheese, how many gallons of milk does it take to make 1 pound wheel of cheese?
So for hard cheeses, like you would think of like cheddar, Colby, Parmesan, any of those, you get about 1 to 10. So 10 pounds of milk will give you about 1 pound of cheese. Because you're leaving the water and the liquid behind and basically only taking the proteins and the solids. So for a soft cheese, like, when we say goat cheese, people think of the soft chèvre, you get about 1 to 8. It's a little bit more yield because you're not squeezing quite as much of the moisture out.
Everything you wanted to know about goat cheese.
Diane Fisher is wondering, are you shakitas, and are there restrictions on that in this otherwise suburban area?
So I am now a registered, I guess you'd call
Certified.
it.
Certified is the word you were looking for.
Certified shochet. We shecht for those who are here living at Ma'alot Farms, which right now is just our family. We have an agricultural use permit, and as far as I know, I actually don't want to speak to it. I'm not sure if there are restrictions in Santa Clara County if you were to do your own slaughter and butcher. For the state of California, if you're doing this just for yourself and for your family, it's pretty easy. If you want to sell any meat, that's a whole other story.
And we have one question. I'm just going to summarize it down to the main question so we can move on. Is it possible, is the farm wheelchair accessible?
Yes, in fact, a lot of our work over the last couple of years has been designing Malot farms so that our whole community will be able to come and be a part of it. So all of the main buildings, the paddocks are all wheelchair accessible. There are the oak forest that we're about to talk about. It might be a little bit tricky to get up all the way up into the oak forest, but most of it, absolutely. Yeah, we look forward to welcoming everybody.
There will be parts of the farm that aren't accessible, and we are building examples of those parts close to the home so that someone who's not able to climb a steep hill will still be able to see everything we have to offer in a more accessible way.
All right, well, maybe we'll stop with questions for the time being, and we'll be able to come back to some more questions at the end. Linda invited us to talk a little bit about trees and to share our love and appreciation of trees, to speak a little bit about how trees work in our ecosystem here. And I think nothing actually makes us qualified in any way to talk about any of this, with one exception, and that is because we've chosen to live a lifestyle that is very close to the land. We, I think, see things maybe that help us to appreciate the trees in our own ecosystem in a different way. You know, when your sustenance in certain ways is the trees in your ecosystem, it raises a level of awareness about them. And Judaism has always taught us that we should seek to cultivate that kind of connection and understanding on the role that trees play in our lives, in our communities, in our food system. The holiday of Tu B'Shvat, which is upcoming this Thursday, the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat, is actually listed in one of the earliest rabbinic texts, the Mishnah, as one of the 4 new years of the Jewish people. So, you know, we thought it's great. We have Rosh Hashanah and New Year's Eve. Well, guess what? There are actually 3 other New Years that we could add to celebrate. And maybe in 2021, we should celebrate all of them, right? Any opportunity to celebrate. There's a New Year's for kings. There's a New Year's for tithing, a New Year's for the trees, and then of course, Rosh Hashanah. So why even have a new year for the trees? Well, for our ancestors, this was a time, there was a functional aspect of Tu B'Shvat. This is when we started counting the year anew when it came to some of the agricultural laws that pertain to trees. So one of the things that the Torah teaches us is that we have to allow for trees to mature. We have to give them time. We can't be greedy and try to take all the fruit off the tree in the first couple of years and use it, because when we do that, we actually are taking energy out of the plant and asking it to work harder. And sometimes that's more difficult for trees. And frequently, if you don't observe this practice of Orla, whether from a religious perspective or just a perspective of a botanist, you actually wind up doing harm to the tree. So how do you know when to start counting the year? Well, when it comes to Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the month of Shvat, that's the day where you start counting. And that's the beginning of a new year, even if, the tree had just put on fruit, the day before. When it comes to Tu B'Shvat, that's the end of the year and the beginning of the second year when we start counting. And we actually go 3 years without using the fruit from our trees before we are able to partake of it. So that's sort of the history of why we have this holiday of Tu B'Shvat. It's why the rabbis highlighted it and made it a part of our community and part of our tradition, but it's come on to take a whole host of other meanings in our lives. It's a time to be a little bit more ecologically mindful, an opportunity to celebrate fruits from trees in the land of Israel, an opportunity to plant, whether it's a tree or some other species. And for those of you who maybe are a little bit older, you might remember it's the time when all of us had to eat that gross carob product in religious school way back when, of celebrating the land of Israel. Well, they couldn't get us some sweet dates. We had to eat carobs instead. But that's actually a memory I have from Tu B'Shvat, eating carob chocolate, which is, we don't recommend that at Mild Oat Farms.
Wait, how do I move this slideshow? There we go. All right, so we wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about trees because they are fundamentally the core of what we're doing here and what we all need to be doing in terms of our environment. So we are lucky, we have an amazing oak forest. This area around us has oak forests and redwood forests. Those are the two sort of main types of forests that we have. And they give us an opportunity to think about all of the things that trees can do for us in our ecosystem. So if you've ever walked in a forest, you can feel the difference in the air. The air has more moisture. The air feels different. That's because the trees actually humidify the air around them. They transpire moisture out of their leaves and hold moisture, which creates microclimates for other things to grow around a tree. They also provide shade. Sorry, I'm trying to click. They provide shade, they provide habitat. This here is a picture of baby red-tailed hawks. They're making a nest in one of our trees. I just told you we had an oak forest. There's a couple of redwood trees someone planted. This happens to be one of the redwood trees. And the hawks make their nest way up in the tree. We had to climb up to the top of the hill to get this picture. And they use this as a space to protect their babies as they are nesting.
So that's a picture of, how old are those hawks?
They're about 5 days old. So those are about 5-day-old red-tailed hawks nesting in this redwood here. This fun. Okay. The trees also here at Mild Oat Farms provide habitat for our domesticated animals. We've got a bunch of these chickens that we saw earlier who have decided that the beautiful recycled coops that we've built for them are not to their liking and they would rather nest up in the trees. So they spend every night hanging out in the plum tree. This is a wild plum that's in the animal yard. And you'll see about dusk, they start to squawk and fight over which branch each chicken picks, and they all are fighting for the best branches, and then they settle in and spend the night up there in that plum tree. Trees are also great for recreation. The goats like to climb trees. The kids like to climb trees. If you're not quite the tree climbing type, I love to put a hammock up in a tree and sit there and read a book, right? That's a great way to use the trees for recreation. And they provide food for us, for the animals. These are some of our acorns. Our entire oak forest looks like this right now, and it provides a lot of winter food for squirrels and owls and all kinds of different birds. And the goats like to eat them. So all these things are amazing things trees do, but these are actually, in my appreciation of trees, secondary to what their main function is. And that is the way their roots create these networks that allow everything to work together. So we're digging here in the soil and you'll see this clump of mulch, which has fallen from the tree, is being held together by these white wispy things. They look kind of like strings. They hold it together. That is mycelium. That is the body of a fungus, of a mushroom. And the tree litter, the leaves, the mulch, the things that fall, feed this mycelium. And this mycelium then creates this network under the entirety of the forest that creates, that that basically turns the forest from a collection of individuals into one unified organism. So the mushrooms that we can harvest here is actually just the fruiting body of this mycelium, but the main part of the mycelium is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards, miles of this white, it looks like white thread, and it's all connected. Some of the biggest single mycelial bodies that have been found in the Midwest, there is a single mushroom body, a single mycelium that's 2,000 kilometers square and still growing. They're these huge networks, but why are they important? They actually allow for the trees to talk to one another. So through these networks that you can see, this is the network, different kinds of fungus, and they're connecting into the roots of the trees. And that allows the roots of the trees to talk to the roots of another tree using chemical signals. It allows them to share nutrients. It allows them to share carbon. There have been studies that were done where a single tree in a forest was covered so that it could not produce any of its own food. And sugars produced by other trees were shared through this network so that that tree could continue to survive even though it wasn't making any food of its own. So we think of trees as these individual entities that are collected in a forest, but really they are their own ecosystem, and in some ways they are even more than that. They are like one body working together. And so if you look at this picture, it says the litter degrading fungus. That means it takes the leaves and it breaks it down into components that then are used by other fungus, by bacteria, by all kinds of microorganisms in the soil. Now, why is this important? Well, lots of reasons, but the microorganisms in the soil are what work to help us sequester carbon. They make the soil more able to support water. So soil, 1 inch of good soil holds 1/10 of the amount of water in a rainstorm that 2 inches will. It's logarithmic, right? It's not 1-to-1 ratio. So as these fungus help us build the soil, it allows for more drought resistance because a single rain can be held and feed the forests. If you walk through some of the majestic forests we have around here, nobody's out there watering them with the hose, right? They self-sustain even through our dry summers because of this rich soil that's been created through this network of roots. Did I forget anything about that? Sounds good. All right. So since we're talking about Tu B'Shvat, we're connecting. We're so lucky in California. Our seasons match a little bit more with Israel, and we can grow many of the species we grow in Israel. Right? We live on the East Coast, and it's snowing today. It's a little harder to think about planting trees and things blossoming than here, where we can see the start of spring. So here at Malot Farms, we grow many of the species that grow in the land of Israel: pomegranates, olives. We grow figs. We don't yet grow dates, but we will get there. And it allows us to really connect our eating and our trees with the Jewish traditional calendars because it lines up. So here you have blossoms. These are actually wild plum blossoms. And these allow, all the blossoms, but one other major thing that the trees do for us here on the homestead is they provide food for one of our smallest farm animals, the bees. And the tree blossoms are usually earlier in the season than many of the other blossoms. So they are the first early food for the bees. If you listen, you can hear the buzzing as they're converting some of that nectar into honey. And then the bees later in the season pollinate the crops along with some of their other pollinator friends. They pollinate the crops, which then provide food for us. Additionally, of course, when you're talking about bees, you have to talk about the the produce of the bees, right? This is one of our youngest beekeepers and pulling a full comb of honey, getting ready to harvest. This was right before Rosh Hashanah last year, getting ready to harvest honey to enjoy with our apples. All right, do we have any questions
Yeah.
at this point? That's just a picture of the kids' favorite goat. They wanted us to make sure she got in there.
Everybody loves baby goats. We thought we'd pause and invite folks, if you have questions about things that Shoshana shared about trees and how they connect with one another, how they help build soil, how they provide for us, for our livestock, for all of the other critters and species we share in the environment. Now is a great time to ask some questions. Or if you just have other questions about our homestead, about Ma'alot Farms,
About trees,
About
about bees, about any of that stuff.
we'll take one more moment for that. And nobody go away, because after we answer these questions, we're actually going to take an opportunity together to think about what we might do as we approach Tu B'Shvat this year on Thursday, ways we can raise our own level of mindfulness about the trees with whom we live. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's see. Linda, do we have any questions?
We have a couple of questions. One is, who's the photographer?
I am.
Oh, they're great. Are there plans to open Ma'alot Farms to the community?
Yes. Obviously, like so many of all of us, all of our lives in a certain way have been turned upside down a little bit with the pandemic. But our building and our infrastructure building continues. We've been blessed. The city of Los Gatos, the county have been wonderful in working with us to keep everything moving. And I think we're hoping to be able to welcome people to Ma'alot Farms in the next year and a half. And of course, we're all just yearning to be together physically with other people. And we're really looking forward to Ma'alot Farms being a place where we can gather as a community.
Are there plans to use volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually in the beginning of our planting phase. Actually, we haven't even
Not yet.
started
We're
our
starting.
planting phase. We'll start next winter in our planting phase. So remarkably, right now, all of the fruit that we are able to enjoy is either wild fruit here. We're blessed to have a bunch of wild fruit that grows on our property, and even more helpfully, neighbors and friends who have been bartering with us or gifting us fruit from their trees, because we just haven't been able to plant any trees yet with all the construction. So as soon as that gets going, we'll have to wait, right? We've got to be patient with the trees. They take a little longer to speak with one another. They take a little longer to produce than other species. But we're going to get planted, and
But the question was about volunteers. So
yeah, and there'll be opportunity
that process, there will be volunteer days and volunteer opportunities and lots of different ways people can connect with the farm.
And I'll invite people who want to volunteer to come to help out in the Shir Hadash gardens until Ma'alot Farms is available, and then maybe you'll want to do both and get different
Absolutely.
kinds of experiences. Somebody was asking if you sell things from your farm at farmers markets, or is it just for your family?
Yeah, right now we're homesteading this land, and then eventually, actually, we likely will never be selling produce. Our mission is really to bring justice to our food system, and part of that will be sharing our abundance from Ma'alot Farms with those who live with food insecurity every day. So whether that's through JFS, our Second Harvest, other partnerships that we're cultivating in the area, that's likely what we will be doing with our abundance. So you'll have to come here and schmooze and have a nosh with us when you're at Ma'alot Farms.
Thank you. Let's see. Why is capturing carbon important, and how does it work?
So capturing carbon is important because, as we all are aware, the global warming is being caused by an increase of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. And so by capturing carbon, it offsets some of those emissions. Now, that's not to say we can capture enough that we also don't have to be mindful of what we emit, but the capture of carbon will hopefully, if it's done on a broad enough scale, will help offset some of the global warming issues that we are facing. And the way that I'm going to give a sort of overview, simplistic view of how the carbon capture works, but basically the more space there is in the soil for roots, for mycelium, for all of those things, the more carbon is stored in those entities. And so as the soil health improves, the soil itself is able to hold more carbon. And once the soil holds more carbon, so carbon, inherently, there's nothing wrong with carbon, right? It's the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that's warming our planet, but carbon makes up the woody material that is a tree, that is the root, that is the mycelial network. So what we're doing by storing carbon is turning carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into solid carbon that's stored and trapped in the earth, where it's no longer affecting our climate. That's sort of the broad strokes overview. If this is of interest to people, it totally coincidentally happened to be Science Friday this past week on carbon capture in the soil through regenerative agriculture. So if you're interested, you can check out their podcast. I happened to listen to it and say, hey, what great timing for Tu B'Shvat.
There's also an article in the New York Times, I believe yesterday, about regenerative agriculture. President Biden came out in the last 2 days stating that he wants to see our next food and farm bill contain funding to support those specifically folks in agriculture in this country that can be incentivized to adapt and adopt regenerative agricultural practices. Actually, the article that was in the New York Times this week talks about a guy who was offered money from his state, I believe it's in Maryland, to convert his cornfields into a regenerative agricultural operation. He did it solely for the money, and now is advocating that all of his neighbors and those who are growing commodity crops adopt some of these practices as a way of helping to save our ecosystems.
And for those of us in California, our state has been working for the last 5 years in terms of climate positive agricultural practices. So there are huge incentive programs being designed throughout the agriculture of California, trying to shift towards more regenerative, both from a water usage perspective, but also from a land management and sustainability perspective.
It is interesting that the move toward regenerative farming is coming as much from the farmers as from outside, as they see how beneficial it is.
Yeah, and it's really that symbiosis between building healthy soil and rebuilding our topsoil. You know, for those of us who maybe have taken an interest in the history of agriculture in this country, and in the 1930s, you know, the Dust Bowl, the enormous loss of topsoil in our country is what started conversations in the United States about adapting our farming practices so that this would not occur. But throughout our world, the level of topsoil, I think, Shoshana, you told me that we saw a study that said in 60 years, we may have completely washed all of the topsoil on our planet, you know, into the oceans, and we may not have any topsoil left. So when we build healthy soil, that in turn creates healthy crops. So if you grow corn and you keep your soil covered all year, and you're companion planting or you're nitrogen fixing through planting in the off season, you're getting healthier corn, which means you're able to sell it for more money, and you're improving our ecosystem. And so when synergies like that can occur, boy, that's a really beautiful thing.
I also want to make a point related to carbon capture, which is a lot of us are thinking this time of year about planting trees. It's a real typical thing to do around Tu B'Shvat, or to donate money for planting new trees in different places, is just to remember that carbon capture is more efficient with older, bigger trees. So it's important to put some of our money into saving forests as well as planting new trees.
Yeah, we
Go on.
actually, I'll make another plug for Jubilee. We're going to be on a panel with Rabbi Jen Rosen and a gentleman from Temple Emmanuel who helped to direct their Green Committee. And I know that Rabbi Rosen now is working and representing an organization that's working on advocacy for regenerative agriculture and other healthy climate practices at a policy level, all as part of a Jewish communal work. So if you're curious, this is something you're interested in learning more about, I invite you to hear Rabbi Rosen speak at Jubilee.
She's the keynote.
Yeah, she's the keynote, and then we'll be on a panel with her a little bit later in the day. But Linda, that's a beautiful segue into what we can all do. You know, it's sure, we live on a farm and we've got an oak forest and we're able to plant fruit trees here, and that's wonderful. But there are lots of things that we can all do in terms of caring for the trees in our ecosystems. We want to invite you to put your ideas in the chat window as we share some of our ideas. Linda just put out a really wonderful, very traditional Jewish activity for Tu B'Shvat, and that's to plant a tree near our homes, or perhaps a bush or a shrub. If you're living in an apartment, or perhaps you're renting, you know, plant something in a planter box outside your front door. Or if all you have is a little windowsill, you can plant some herbs in a windowsill. These are all wonderful ways of raising our intention and raising our awareness of the importance of trees in our ecosystems. So that's one idea we had for you. A second idea, this idea might sound a little strange to some of you, but it's actually something really important we can all do. And that's to allow our trees to self-fertilize and feed our ecosystem by leaving our leaf litter in place whenever possible. So for those of you who are out there raking your leaves out from under your trees and having to bag them all up and then schlep them all the way to the green bin, we've got a deal for you. You can just leave all that there. You can forget all of that raking. The beautiful thing, as Shoshana was showing in an earlier slide, when you allow that leaf litter to stay in place, it actually winds up feeding the trees. It provides moisture from evaporating from the soil, and does a lot of great things. So we highly encourage you to leave those leaves in place and let them do their thing along with the trees, and invite those mycelium and all those microorganisms to come and chow down. And then finally, we wanted to share a way that we found to be meaningful in our own lives and in the life of our family, in terms of maintaining a mindfulness about the critical roles that trees play. And that is finding opportunities to say blessings. There are a whole host of Jewish blessings that are tied to trees, whether we're eating fruit from a tree from the land of Israel, or smelling new blossoms on a tree for the first time, or seeing blossom, or perhaps being out in a forest and seeing a beautiful a horizon or vista that's encapsulated by the trees. There's a blessing to say on just appreciating being in that moment in nature. So we shared a list of blessings. Linda's going to throw it up in the chat, I think, for us. It's just two sheets of blessings that you can print out or put on your device. And we invite you this week to maybe go for a walk. Either it's in your own neighborhood, or go for a hike somewhere, and take these blessings sheets with you and see if you can find some opportunities to say a blessing over a tree. And in the way it either brings you sustenance or pleasure, or brings you a sense of comfort or a sense of connection, especially during this time as we're all staying at home and taking care of ourselves by being physically apart. So just some ideas for things we can do for the trees in our ecosystem. Let's see, Linda, did anyone have some ideas they put in the chat? Let me see if I can. I'm gonna see if I can see the chat here. Oh, we got a whole bunch of suggestions. Let's see. Oh, let's see, Michal, oh, thank you, Michal. Michal pointed out, if we're gonna plant things, it would be a wonderful idea to plant species that are native to our ecosystems. I'll tell you, we have these redwood trees in our oak forest, and they never do well. And they're not suited really to be in our ecosystem. And what that does is it puts a strain on our resources, right? So to plant things that are drought resistant, as Michal said, attract bees or build good soil, those are all great ideas. They cut their water bill in half in 1 year by planting native plants. That's awesome, Michal. Melissa pointed out we can plant bee-friendly flowers, an awesome idea. That shot that you saw at the beginning of our slides, all of that clover we planted along with a whole host of other perennial flowers to be able to feed our bees throughout the whole year. So we made that mix so that we would have blossoms in every month. So that's a fun activity that you can do with the internet. If you want to put together a little packet of seeds of flowers from all the different months and throw those out and see how they do somewhere, give them a little water, they'll probably do okay for you. Linda, avoiding using pesticides, that obviously, that's a wonderful idea, and certainly keeps other species safe. And let's see, Jan wrote, oh, she's mulched with pine straw, and as it breaks down, the mulch, yeah, that's right.
What we talk about in regenerative agriculture is naked soil is bad soil, right? So when you leave your soil bare, it allows for much more evaporation and you get that dry cracking. It's not as good. So any kind of mulch, whether it's pine mulch or leaf litter, or even just plain old straw, shredded newspaper, whatever it is that you have, as much of your soil as you can cover will allow it to be healthier.
All right.
So the question, do you have a favorite plant nursery? I'm assuming that's a local question. Is that a local question? Summer Winds Nursery actually carries a lot of native species, and they have them well labeled so you can tell what they are. And also, oh, we need to stop sharing so people can see the blessing sheet. Oh, because there you go. And oh, Linda's sharing it. And also Yamagami's Nursery, which is on, shoot, what's the name of that road? Dianza, that turns into Saratoga Los Gatos. It also has a very wide variety of native plants.
Well, it's amazing how quickly the time went. We are so grateful to you, Sheikh Hadash, for inviting us and for taking this weird virtual tour of Malot Farms. And like we said, we can't wait to be able to welcome you to come and volunteer in planting and harvesting and enjoying some of the bounty here at Malot Farms when we're able to be together and to do so.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great presentation. I think we've learned a lot from you, a lot from each other, and everyone will be very excited to come and visit. I will send out the blessings to everyone who is here because I think I have all the emails in the registration. So
great.
Thank you all very much. It's been a great afternoon.
Chag Sameach, everyone.
Wonderful.
How about a silent a round of applause?
All right, everyone, take care.
Night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.